Welcome in, everybody, to another edition of COPD Navigator House Call. My name is Mike Hess. I am a respiratory therapist, COPD advocate, COPD educator, lots of COPD stuff. As a matter of fact, starting to go by the COPD dude just to kind of encompass everything under one umbrella. Welcome into this episode. Obviously, we're up a little bit early. We're going to be leading into, it is my great pleasure to lead into the Right to Breathe virtual patient seminar coming up at 4:30 Eastern Time, featuring Joe Morrison and his group, along with Michelle Da Silva, their chief educator. And I understand their special guests today are Jim and Mary Nelson, who are longtime supporters of COPD Navigator, of course, and incredible COPD advocates. Jim is a post double lung transplant recipient. Mary has been his caregiver for a very long time, is an expert on hospice, palliative care, all that sort of thing. So it is my pleasure to go on a little bit early today so that we can lead into that and not interfere too much with that stuff. So good afternoon, Joe. Yes, as you may have noticed, the lighting is a little bit different in here. I've been fiddling around with some stuff again after our little debacle with the green screen yesterday. I decided to just again fiddle around with the lighting a little bit. This is always a work in progress. Also was able to change some of the settings. I kind of forgot that the computer itself can actually change some of the settings on the color and saturation and all that kind of fun stuff. So I went ahead and experimented with that a little bit. I am glad to see that it is noticeable. So hopefully we won't have too much in the way of error today. We're off to a good start. Welcome in Gene from down in Tennessee. Again, longtime supporter. Again, this is a great time to get your questions in so that we can get them answered. We are going to have a pretty hard stop at 4:30 today. Again, I know this is I know that Right to Breathe, Joe Morrison's group has put a lot of work into their stuff, and I don't want to step on that at all. So let's go ahead and get some stuff in early. One thing I do want to throw out there. I've been working also this morning a little bit to kind of clean up the media presence, focused on YouTube a bit today. We got some of our Breathe TV episodes from prior to the pandemic, got those into a nice playlist. The next thing up is I'm going to be editing some of those down a little bit so that we can focus on the distinct educational portion of that. So cut that down to about a half hour or so, separate the wheat from the chaff, such as it is. What else we're gonna do? We got a couple of respiratory therapy tribute videos. So those are things that I've been working on. Obviously this has been a big time for respiratory therapists, and a lot of people, unless you were in the COPD world or the asthma world or the cystic fibrosis world, things like that. You may not have known what a respiratory therapist was, but of course this is kind of throwing our acute care colleagues very much into the spotlight right now. So I also put together a couple of media clips out there that are on YouTube. One of them is a little bit more dramatic and bombastic and that sort of thing. One of them is a little bit more chill. And I want to get those out there so that everybody can kind of know who we are, what we do, and remember that there are more folks than just doctors and nurses that work in the hospital. Of course, also shout out to my colleagues in every aspect of healthcare. Again, those doctors and nurses that are still working on the front lines right now. Physical therapists, occupational therapists, environmental services, cafeteria folks, everybody who is putting themselves at risk in the hospital, out of the hospital, everywhere else. Thank you very much, and please stay as safe as you can. Wash those hands, stay away from your face, all that good stuff. And again, thank you for all your service during this time. Pardon me. No, I am not sick. Knock on wood. Something, whatever that is. But this is, of course, allergy and cold season, or not cold season so much, but allergy season. So we're going to jump right into a question we've got coming in with V. V asks, if you have COPD, what are the best masks to use? And this is a question that sometimes has a different answer depending on what time of year it is, because there are some very good masks out there. When we usually talk about masks, we're talking about things that can go over your face, especially when it's cold, to help keep things together and all that sort of thing, keep everything warmed up and humid and all that stuff. These days, um, we had a conversation yesterday about what's the best, is the best the same as the easiest and the most practical and all that stuff. And unfortunately, these days the answer is fairly complicated. If you have COPD, you know, well, even without, for anybody, I'm going to take out the caveats there. For anybody, really, the best mask to use is an N95 mask. Properly fitted, properly worn, properly donned and doffed, all those sorts of things. That is, really the ideal mask that you're going to use. Of course, it's not really practical right now. Those are the masks that will keep you safe, that will keep the bad stuff from getting into your lungs and keep you going okay. The next step from that is a traditional surgical mask. I think they're made out of polypropylene or something like that. The things that you get if you were to go in a regular time to your doctor's office or your provider's office. The standard surgical mask is like a square. It's got the little elastic things that go over your ears. Again, making sure that it fits under your chin and over your nose, and that you're actually creasing the little band to keep as much of a seal as you can there. That is the next best option. Unfortunately, when we start getting into these kind of masks, we're getting away from the whole idea of protecting you from what's out, and instead you're protecting everybody else from what's in. These are things that if you were to cough, you were to sneeze, all that stuff, it kind of keeps your droplets in. Then we start getting into, these days we're talking about all these homemade masks and things like that, and there's a lot of controversy about what these masks are, because again, what the best mask is not available. So, we're talking about scrapping together stuff from cotton fabrics, household fabrics, scarves, bandanas, all that sort of thing. I don't know that I would really have an opinion that any of those is better than another. I would probably go with something that you're going to wear, something that you're comfortable wearing, something that is not blocking your exhalation any more than is necessary, because obviously with COPD, you already have some trouble getting the air out. And you don't want to impede that any more than it already is. You don't want to have more stuff going wrong in there, and making it and causing you to potentially trap more air and all that kind of stuff. So the closest you can get to that surgical kind of mask would probably be the best recommendation I would have. So if you have a little bit of elastic in there, and again, you're making a good seal with your nose and that sort of thing. But again, the best thing to do is still going to be very diligent about washing your hands, making sure that you're staying away from folks. I've seen some guidance that we've been telling people stay 6 feet away, and now there's some talk that maybe it's more like 12 feet. That's what they're looking at over in Asia right now, where they're starting to see kind of a second wave of infections coming back again. That and the hand washing and all that sort of thing, those are still going to be your best defense against catching this stuff. And again, of course, the staying at home, wherever you are. I mean, not every place has an order yet, but to be frank, everybody should. And if you don't, I said in an interview the other day, if you're in a place that has a stay-at-home order, please be following it. And if you aren't in a place that has a stay-at-home order, follow it anyway, because that really is going to be the best defense. And that actually leads into one of the things that I wanted to mention, not necessarily as a news item, but I don't know if anybody, for those of you who might be on Twitter, and if you are, please feel free to follow us up in the corner there at COPD Navigator. But one of the folks I follow is an excellent pulmonologist from over in the UK by the name of Dr. Hurst. And one of the things that he mentioned was, and this kind of correlates very well with a lot of the stuff that we've been seeing in the U.S. as well. COPD exacerbations, those flare-ups flare-ups, yeah, okay. Flare-ups of symptoms seem to be down right now, which maybe is a little bit counterintuitive. You might not necessarily think that kind of thing would be down right now with this virus floating around and everything else going on, particularly during allergy season. But it does seem to be the case. And again, it kind of goes along with the whole idea of we've been seeing some underrepresentation of COPD in folks with COVID-19, the disease, the condition you get from the coronavirus. Because, and again, it's kind of my theory that I think that a lot of folks are following these stay-at-home orders, being physically isolated. I think that's very helpful to do. And I think along with that is the idea that you're also avoiding a lot of those triggers, being that this is allergy season. Maybe you're not out as much and you should still be as active as you can around your house and safety and all that stuff. But maybe you're not going to places where you have triggers. Maybe if you are home from work, you're still in the workforce, but you're home from work right now, maybe you're not exposed to chemicals or fumes or whatever those other triggers are that you routinely are. This kind of ties in with the thing that John Linnell, who is another outstanding advocate and person living with COPD, mentioned. This is a great time to kind of evaluate what's different in your life right now compared to the baseline, because obviously a lot of things are different right now. And so if you're having a change in symptoms, hopefully it's a little bit better. But if it's a little bit worse, this is a great time to kind of reevaluate where things are, what's different about your life. And then now you can have a better sense of where those triggers are and what's causing those exacerbations, what's causing all those flare-ups and all that sort of thing. The other thing that, and I hate to say it, is, we've got a lot less travel right now. So air pollution is down a bit. I know that there's been I heard stories about how you can hear birds chirping on Fifth Avenue in New York right now. I mean, I think there was a coyote that was seen on the Golden Gate Bridge. And in some ways, maybe that's a little almost apocalyptic, but in other ways, it's kind of showing that if we can get a control over some of these pollutants and stuff, we can all breathe a little bit better and get some of that fresh air and enjoy that and reap the benefits from that. So yeah, there we go. That was a lot going on there. So thank you, Cooking with V, for starting that conversation here. And I want to scroll just a little bit. Trying a new thing. I'm trying to go doing Twitter, and let's see. It said something about scroll to look at comments. So I'm not seeing where that's working or not. So I'm gonna try something new here. Again, we're trying all kinds of new stuff here. Oh, I thought I shared that I shared that in the wrong place. Way to go. Way to go, Mike. So again, if you're following us on Twitter, then, or if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow us. And there we go. Because now we've got another avenue. So, all right. So, hello, Judy. Quiet over there. All right. Hopefully it's kind of quiet in the sense of respiratory issues and things are not going terrible for you. And hopefully it's not too terrible along the realm of actual sound. I haven't really messed with the sound setup too much today, so hopefully that's going okay. And that's not what you meant by quiet. We also, like I said, I decided to not mess around too much with the cool, fun virtual backgrounds and all that stuff today. I think it might just be just a hair too much for my computer, so backed off on that a bit. Maybe come back to that at some point someday. It was kind of fun to sit in the sick bay, the original Enterprise, and do the show and chat with everybody here. So, okay. So, as I said, we talked a little bit, or I saw a little bit about the idea that exacerbations are down and all that sort of thing. There was a question about whether maybe people are just not seeking care right now because you're concerned about going to an ER, going to urgent cares and things like that, and possibly exposing yourself to stuff. And that is certainly a concern. And I would definitely recommend trying to do the whole virtual telehealth thing, like what we're doing right here, as much as possible. But of course, that's not always possible. So, and that was the thought was, are people just not seeking care, or what's going on exactly? And from what Dr. Hurst was saying, he has been able to do a little bit of outreach, a little bit of these virtual visits kind of thing, and everybody seemed to be doing okay. So the thought was, it wasn't that necessarily people were not seeking care, it was that people were really not as sick. So again, it's kind of, is it the lack of, or the lower pollutants, contaminants? Is it staying inside? Is it, some people are having higher stress, some people are having lower stress, because another thing that people were talking about is, we have stressful jobs, maybe not, in the US these days, we get stressed out at work. I'll say that. And we don't necessarily have more stressful jobs than have been in the past, but we have stress at work for a variety of reasons. I know, speaking for myself, there's this whole idea, and if anybody in the clinical side follows Z-Dog MD out there, he's a fantastic healthcare advocate from out on the West Coast. He talks about this idea of moral injury, where we in healthcare know what the right thing to do is, and we want to do the right thing, but we're often prevented from doing the right thing because of organizational barriers. Like, many of you know, I talk all the time about prior authorizations and things like that, trying to do extra paperwork so that we can actually get people what they need instead of what an accountant thinks that they should pay for. And maybe that's part of it. Maybe if you're having lower work stress because you're off, maybe that is influencing your lungs less. It's really kind of a funny thing. Nobody, we don't really have a solid explanation for it, because this is kind of uncharted territory for a lot of people. So we don't entirely know what to make of it. And we're likely going to be learning a lot, and who knows exactly what's going to come out of this. But we also know that we really shouldn't go back to healthcare the way it was. We shouldn't necessarily go back to normal in a lot of respects, because in a lot of ways, normal really wasn't working for a lot of people. All right, so pardon me for that. It is just a touch on the dry side here. So again, we've got, keep looking over to the side of the screen. That is where comments come through. We do have two comment streams, really. We've got one on the main video, which you can find either on YouTube at youtube.com/c/COPD Navigator, or you can find it on Facebook at facebook.com/COPD Navigator. If you happen to be in our group, which is also called COPD Navigator, because we gotta stick with that consistent branding as much as possible, right? But we've got a couple of watch parties going on, so wherever you may be, don't get too upset if you can't see the video too well. One thing I'm looking at, probably Thursday at this point, I will have a definitive answer tomorrow. I am looking at putting together one of those infamous Zoom conferences that have been going on lately. A lot of times we've been seeing Zoom birthday parties and Zoom happy hours and all kinds of stuff going on. But I would like to introduce a little bit more interactivity to these kind of things and see what we can do with the Zoom platform. So make sure that you're following either our Facebook or our Twitter, so that when I get that information, I will send that out and let you know how to sign up for that sort of thing. if you're interested, of course, these are things where we can have a little bit more interactivity with some video and some audio. We can actually have a conversation, which is often helpful. But again, you don't necessarily have to participate with the video. You don't even necessarily, I don't know why you would do video without audio, but I mean, that's an option. Or you can just kind of observe the whole thing and see what happens. So that is what it is. Wanda, hello Wanda from Connecticut with COPD and asthma and allergies. So kind of a triple whammy right there. The what is often known as the asthma COPD overlap syndrome, which I tend to call COPD with reactive airways because there's just so much debate and disagreement about whether that is such a thing as overlap or whether we should just treat it like asthma or what have you. But everybody's got their opinion on that. I tend to go with, like I said, with the idea of having chronic obstruction as in COPD, but you also have those reactive airways. And so this time of year, when we're having a lot of pollen, we're having these wild temperature and pressure changes because the weather's constantly changing. I would imagine it's much the same in Connecticut as it is here in Michigan. We were 70 degrees a couple of days ago. Last night we got down to about 30. A little bit of frost on the windows this morning, so it is all over the place. And of course, we've got rainy days and sunny days, so the barometric pressure is all over the place, wreaking havoc with a lot of people with COPD and asthma and, of course, allergies. So that's why I mean the triple whammy there. So hopefully you're using your excellent respiratory technique or inhaler technique and all that stuff and making sure that you are keeping yourself as healthy as possible. So welcome in. Welcome into a lot of folks. We've fortunately been able, had kind of a groundswell of support in the last couple of days, getting out the message about COPD Navigator, because I really want, as I've mentioned a couple of times, I really think this whole idea of telehealth and using the video and interactive tools that we have is going to be a really big deal in healthcare going forward. My wife is a nurse practitioner, and they've already been integrating not just phone visits, but teleconferencing visits like this through your electronic medical record. I almost got it out. But you're having all those things and able to do this stuff with, again, not having that risk of going to the ER, going to the urgent care, sitting in the waiting room at your provider's office for a while. And I think this is really going to be where things are at in the future, because it ticks a lot of boxes. We can go back and you can review the tape, as it were. You can go back and see, well, what did he say about this? Or we can make a video about how do you use your good inhaler technique, or how do you use something like an aerobica, or what's a valved holding chamber for. We can have all of these reference materials, have them easily accessible for reference and all that stuff, and also develop these customized programs for each individual case. Not only that, we can develop resources for folks who can't access certain resources. Like as I was cleaning up the COPD Navigator account on YouTube, I came across a thing that I had forgotten about. We have a whole playlist of pulmonary rehab activities that you can do at home, which is perfect for this time where pulmonary rehab is often closed or otherwise inaccessible, and these are things you don't need a lot of equipment for. I'm trying to grab the link real quick here. These are things that you don't necessarily need a lot of equipment for. You certainly can use equipment with them, but just things that you can do right at home. This one has, let's see, I've got looks like 7 videos of various lengths, and they're all from various clinical resources. These aren't just things that are flying around willy-nilly or anything like that. These are all things that people have actually done and are clinically appropriate and all that stuff. Let's see if I can get that copied and pasted there. So I got a link to each of those, or I got a link to that overall playlist here. Sent that out to the video stream. Hopefully, I know it went out to, yeah, there we go. Went to Facebook and YouTube, and it went to the watch party. So covering all our bases there. So this is the power of telemedicine, in my opinion. For those of you who might be watching on Twitter, go ahead and search us out at COPD Navigator on YouTube, and it's a playlist that's just called At Home Pulmonary Rehab Ideas. So check that out, or go ahead and add us, and we'll get you connected with that link. So, but like I said, either way, however you're watching this, this is the whole idea of telehealth, and I'm hopeful that this is going to really take off a little bit, because I think this is a really good way to be doing stuff. So now we've come to that part of the program where waiting on a couple more questions from everybody here. Please feel free, or we're also looking for stories. We're looking at let's see, we're looking for stories, we're looking for questions, we're looking at suggestions, we're looking at let's see, just getting a breaking message coming in here. I'm going to try and pull up real quick from one of my bronchiectasis experts, a gentleman by the name of Brad, who is mentioning some breaking temporary CMS guidelines. So let's see, there we go. All right, so bear with me here as Facebook spins around for a minute. As far as CMS goes, I can say that I am aware that we just were able to stave off putting non-invasive ventilators into competitive billing. So let's see, we've got some new temporary CMS guidelines, could be very helpful to more patients with an airway clearance issue. So we know that a major issue in many cases of COPD, we often call it chronic bronchitis, or the chronic bronchitis side of COPD, also has a lot of bronchiectasis, which is probably where Brad's input is coming in here. We see people having trouble getting that junk up, that mucus, the secretions, the phlegm, whatever you want to call it. And it has been difficult in many cases to get coverage or for the appropriate devices to get things to mobilize that stuff. And it has been a problem. So we've got temporary Medicare coverage criteria waiver for respiratory devices in response to COVID-19. So we've got, it looks like, and hopefully this will last for a little while here, because I might have to write a whole bunch of orders in the next couple of weeks. We may be able to get more people things like a cough assist or a vest therapy thing that actually physically pounds on your chest. And some of that guidance is a little bit easier to do these days. So that could be a really big deal. So I know that, obviously a lot of folks, and first of all, thank you, Brad, for bringing that to my attention. I think I had seen something along those lines, but I had not actually, hadn't occurred to me to mention that or anything like that. So, but that, if you are one of those folks who have had trouble in the past with a lot of junk, and maybe you have used one of these aerobica devices or something similar, where you're actually, there are these things where they're kind of knocking loose the secretions from the inside. Another one is the aerobica. If you have tried those and you're still having trouble, if you've talked to your provider before about getting one of these vests or a cough assist device, if any of this stuff sounds familiar, try to reach out to your provider now, because it might be a lot easier to push through a lot of those things. I hate to take advantage of a situation, of a bad situation, but it might be a lot easier for a lot of folks to get those things covered, while Medicare is kind of scrambling a little bit to get this stuff under control, and their attention maybe is a little bit diverted by this novel coronavirus. So thanks, Brad, for bringing that up and for highlighting the importance of that. Also, I'd like to say hello to Kim, another Michigan person and another fine respiratory advocate, Kim. Fun story about Kim, actually dyed her hair orange a couple years back to help celebrate going orange for COPD Awareness Month. So Kim is a fantastic sport and a longtime supporter of our local Harmonicas for Health program, which is chronically struggling. Um, but nice to see you popping by, Kim. Speaking of various color things, I might need some suggestions for the old nails. It's time for another manicure. We thought might be able to get it done last night, but I need to talk to my daughter Emma and get the flashy hollow taco nails done up again. So we've got red and blue and purple and a couple other colors. No orange yet, ironically. Might have to reach out to the manufacturer there and see if we can do something between now and November, COPD Awareness Month. Hopefully, we're all out walking around again by November, just in time for everything to freeze up again for us. So let's see what else is new in the world of COPD. This is, as mentioned a couple of times, we're still in kind of a gray, dead zone for a lot of information coming out. Part of that due to usually this is a kind of a quiet time because American Thoracic Society conference is usually coming up in a couple weeks. That's not happening, but sometimes the publication pipelines still respect that. But again, the studies are just kind of on hold right now. So speaking of ATS though, here is a study that was published on a website called Medical Express, which is not entirely promising, but let's see what we've got here. We've got the headline is LAMA, long-acting muscarinic antagonist. So these are your meds like, these are your Incruises, your Seabreeze, your Spirivas, your Lonhalas, your Upelleries, those kind of controller medications that you're going to take every day. More effective, we'll have to see what the combination is because it says LAMA combination therapy, more effective for COPD patients with exercise intolerance. So let's see what we've got here. Oh, okay. So this is apparently a new clinical practice guideline from ATS. So we're going to have to look into that a little bit more. But what they're saying, the American Thoracic Society has published an official clinical practice guideline in which a panel of experts strongly recommended LABA/LAMA. So these are both kinds of bronchodilators. These are the greenish row and this weird brown row. Or no, I'm sorry, those are the combinations. So the orange row, orangish yellow row here. Or we can go into this kind of chunk right here, and these are your combination LAMA/LABAs. Better, strongly recommended that over LABA or LAMA alone, which is similar but not exactly the same as what GOLD, the Global Initiative for COPD, says. So let's see. In this new clinical practice guideline, an expert panel addressed 6 emerging questions about COPD management that were not covered in the previous guideline from 2011. So let's see. So we've got summary of all the recommendations from that thing. So it starts off with the idea of having both bronchodilators rather than just one of either kind. Among those people with COPD who have shortness of breath or activity intolerance despite dual therapy, then we go to add the steroid on top of that and go to triple therapy. So I guess that one, also the way this is written on this article is a little bit backwards because it's also saying suggests the use of triple therapy compared with dual therapy with the 2 bronchodilators in those folks with a history of 1 or more exacerbations in the past year requiring antibiotics or steroids. So I guess, well, still they're saying start with the double bronchodilator and then move on to the triple therapy, which makes sense. In patients who are taking triple therapy, we suggest that the steroid condition or the steroid component can be withdrawn if the patient has had no exacerbations in the past year. So that's interesting. That kind of goes along with the growing idea of step down therapy. That is also in gold, because we're trying to minimize exposure to those inhaled corticosteroids, even though they're certainly better than the systemic steroids, but we still want to reduce your exposure to that sort of thing. Let's see. We do not make a recommendation for or against ICS as an additive therapy to long-acting bronchodilators in patients with COPD and high eosinophil count. Except for those with a history and one or more exacerbations. So really what they're looking at is going not necessarily based on the eosinophil count, which is, I guess, somewhat controversial, I would say, except in those who have had an exacerbation. So they're really saying that it's, again, the exacerbation count that matters rather than the eosinophil count. In patients with a history of severe and frequent exacerbations, despite otherwise optimal therapy, we suggest against using maintenance oral corticosteroid therapy. So that is a long-winded way of saying, traditionally we've put people on a particular dose of prednisone just every day, all day, every day, no matter what. And again, we're trying to get away from that because particularly with the systemic steroids, the oral and the intravenous, those tend to have a lot of side effects. Mood changes and weight changes and body changes and all those kinds of things. So we still want to make sure that we're minimizing that approach. And then the last thing, with folks in individuals with COPD who experience advanced refractory dyspnea, so this is shortness of breath no matter what, despite good therapy, we suggest that opioid-based therapy be considered for dyspnea management within a personalized shared decision-making approach. So that one they really hedge their bets on and call it a conditional recommendation with very low certainty evidence. So the idea there is that I know, particularly in hospice and those sorts of settings, sometimes we have used nebulized morphine as it doesn't really do much for the lung function dynamics or anything like that, but sometimes it can just reduce that sense of breathlessness. We aren't 100% sure we know what the mechanism is, but it can happen. They're not saying necessarily nebulized with this summary, so I don't know if that's exactly what they're talking about, but it may be useful to use a very small bit of morphine or another opioid, hopefully a lower power opioid, not necessarily like an OxyContin or something that's going to get you hooked on that, but a reasonable dose. And that may help with some of the breathlessness. But again, very low certainty evidence there. So interesting. I'm going to do a little bit deeper dive in that, and once we get back to doing the regular show, the regular Breathe TV show, where we have the news of the week and then the topic and then the question and answer period, we'll address that a little bit more. So Joe mentions using Stiolto plus budesonide and levalbuterol by nebulizer twice a day. So that's a pretty good combination. I'm a fan of Stiolto because I'm a fan of Spiriva. The other component to that, which I believe is Olodaterol, Olodaterol is a little bit newer on the market and is therefore a little less proven. Seems to work okay. Also a fan in general of the delivery device. We've talked about the importance of actual device selection and not just thinking of the molecule. This is a fairly nice device because if you have the hand strength and dexterity to be able to twist this part and flip that open and all that stuff, this comes out in let's see if this will show up a little bit. So it comes out in kind of this slow moving mist. And makes it kind of nice to inhale, a little bit easier to inhale until you get the hang of it and all that stuff. You still might get a little bit of a cough and all that, but it's a pretty good device. Again, if you have the hand strength to do the twisting and all that stuff. Budesonide, solid steroid, inhale. So Joe is on a triple therapy regimen here. And the levalbuterol, again, not medical advice or anything like that. That's a little bit unusual just in the sense that you're using it scheduled twice a day. That is a somewhat older regimen, in my opinion. We used to do these short-acting bronchodilators. Levoalbuterol is a form of more traditional albuterol. Um, I tend to use it more strictly for for relief and or for what a lot of times people might call rescue, or when you have those acute episodes of shortness of breath. Um, and obviously don't stop it or anything, but if you were my patient, I would ask you a little bit more about if it's helping and what order you're doing the meds in, because I would prefer to see, particularly with the Ciolto, I would rather see that be inhaled first before you get into any of the other stuff, just because of the way the receptors work in the lungs. That's pretty solid therapy. Mendo checking in. Good to see you again, Mendo. Long time no see. I use morphine to help me exercise, 10 milligrams liquid lingually, 30 minutes before I get on the treadmill. So there you go. That's what these ATS recommendations are saying. There are people who the pendulum on the opioid stuff just keeps swinging wildly, because there are people where it's completely appropriate, and then there are people where we're just trying to throw whatever we can at them, and these drugs have gotten so potent and so powerful and so what's the word I'm looking for? They're so profit generating, I guess. I don't know, there seems like there would be a word for that. I'm sure there is. I'm just blanking on it right now. These have been a focus for a long time, and then it led to a lot of other problems. And instead of, again, kind of clarifying what is an appropriate dose and what's our good strategy and let's go with the evidence, then we kind of had this knee-jerk reaction where, okay, well, nobody can have opioids now, nobody can have morphine, nobody can do any of this stuff. And we're seeing, again, a lot of our folks who have chronic pain issues and need this for exercise. That's a problem. And now there's 8,000 more hoops to jump through, even if somebody's been on this stuff for a long time. So it's interesting to see how this stuff evolves. I'm glad this is a plan that works for you, but this is exactly the use case that the ATS recommendation is saying, where, yeah, if it's maybe not the first thing you jump to, but if you're on optimized other therapy and and this is what's next, then this could be appropriate. Mendo goes on to mention that similarly on triple therapy, so both kinds of bronchodilators and those inhaled corticosteroids, plus azithromycin twice a week. Twice a week. Okay. Usually, again, the regimens for that, and again, this is not saying that anything is wrong or anything like that. Often the regimen is either 3 times a week or every day, depending on the milligram dosages. So twice a week, that's cool. That's one that I don't see very often. So, but again, if it's working for you, then it's working for you. Just, there are people who the official dose of albuterol is 2 puffs, but they get by just fine with 1. So, I always have the caution that that's, not the FDA approved. This isn't off-label use and blah, 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 blah. But if that's working for you, then it's working for you, is my philosophy. I tend to be a fairly practical guy. So, it is 3 times a week. Okay, cool. So, I wasn't 100% familiar with that regimen, but don't tell my kids, but I don't know everything. So I do want to draw everybody's attention. We're coming up on about 20 after 4. So in about 10 minutes, I'm going to see if I can grab a link again. We've got, I want to throw this over to the Right to Breathe page, or they've actually got I believe they've got a Blue Jeans conference thing set up, where we can have a little bit more interactive discussion. I say we. I'm looking at joining it, but I am not leading that one. However, some really good people are. Like I said, this is we've got Joe Morrison as the leader of Right to Breathe. We've got Michelle Da Silva, who is there, I believe, the director of education is the appropriate title there. Let's see. I'm gonna get see if I can scroll down here. They're hosting a thing with Jim and Mary Nelson. I mentioned at the top of the program. So let's see. I'm going to grab This is a link to, well, I tell you what, I'm gonna see if I can get onto their page. So where I'm going with all this stuff, and while I'm fiddling around with all this, get your last couple of questions in here, because like I said, at 4:30, I am gonna hand this over to hand the internet. I'm going to officially hand over the internet to the folks over at Right to Breathe. Get out of their way and let them do their thing, because it's a fantastic group, and that's going to be a great conversation with some excellent discussions. So emailing, let's see, I'm going to copy and paste the actual link to the video. I'm going to try to anyway. Oops, got to back up a little bit. There we go. Finally know what I'm doing. And we'll drop this into the watch party. Wow, that's a big link. But click on that and it should take you where you need to go. And then I'm also going to drop it into the main feed here. Like I said, this is a big link. Kind of a, that's actually even too long for that. So let's see if I can, maybe that'll work. In any event, if you, worst case, head on over to Right to Breathe on Facebook, and you can get the links there. They're having a thing at 4:30 and a thing at 7 o'clock, so not to be missed. So last call for whatever is on anybody's mind. Again, appreciate everybody checking in on a Tuesday here. This has been a strange couple of weeks, and trying to think how to say this, because I have some concern. We look like maybe we're hitting a plateau in some of our cases here in Michigan, and we got some more data today that maybe we're not looking at that plateau, but we still have some question about, especially with a holiday weekend, were the how accurate was the data that was reported. So are we looking at a couple of days lumped together? So we are definitely not out of the woods yet. So as I've mentioned a couple of different times, make sure you're continuing to follow your distancing, your physical distancing, and your social connection at a distance suggestions. Make sure that you're continuing to wash your hands and all that fun stuff. Make sure that you are taking care of yourselves, making sure that you have all that you need from your providers, whether you need prescriptions, whether you need to get them mail ordered, whatever it is. Make sure you're taking care of yourselves. See if you can get somebody to go to the store for you and keep yourself at lower risk, all that kind of fun stuff. Because like I said, we're not out of the woods yet. And we're in that really dangerous time where things look like we're having a lot of success and things are going really well. But if we get a little bit too relaxed, if we don't continue to take this seriously, then we might get that second wave that's hitting Japan right now. And that's not going to be good, because, we're still, even when this is over in the healthcare system, there's going to be a lot of fatigue and a lot of just, hate to use the word burnout, but a lot of people are just going to be spent. And if we throw everybody right back into the fire, that's going to be problematic. So don't lay off just yet here. There we go. Joe has very graciously given us a copy of the link. So if you're in the watch party, you can catch that there. And then I will put that over into the feed. And I got a huge link again. So copy though. Oh man, when I just do this. Oh, and it looks like maybe I'm frozen somehow. That's a bummer. Well, that's all right though, because we've got we are at 4:25, so we're gonna be wrapping things up anyway. So we've got all that going on. So yeah, we'll just go ahead and take a moment to farewells for the day. We'll be back tomorrow at our usual time, 4 o'clock Eastern, which I believe is 8 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time, so around the world. I know it sounds cocky, but we do have some people who check in from time to time from the UK, from Australia, from all over the place. Always looking to expand our audience. So again, if you would be so kind as to, if anybody is actually, well, Joe just replied, so at least the audio is coming through. Oh, there's some weird. There we go. So yeah, head on over to Right to Breathe. Make sure you're getting signed up for their webinar. It's going to be a fantastic time. Also, if you would please share, like, subscribe, all these things on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. That helps me get the message out. The more engagement we have on these channels, the higher they appear in searches and all that kind of stuff, so that it's easier for everybody to connect with the resources that they need. Hopefully you feel that this is a worthy thing. If you don't feel it's worthy, if you feel like it's a bunch of garbage or anything like that, please let me know, because like I tell my patients, the people under my care, I can't fix a problem if I don't know what it is. So if you don't think this stuff is worth it, if you think that these are a problem, or I'm missing a thing, or I'm not doing something right, please let me know so that I can do better and that we can all do better together. So with that, Joe mentioned he's signing off and heading over to start the webcast going. So I am also going to sign off. I appreciate, again, everybody stopping by, and I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. In the meantime, please, as it says at the bottom of the screen, as always, stay strong, stay safe, stay home as much as possible, wash your hands, make good decisions, all that kind of fun stuff. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and keep breathing easy. We will see you again tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Until then, take care, everybody.